I'm about to talk about right now is one of the darkest acts caught on live TV. Basically, it's the case of Gary. And his kid was an active kid. He constantly wanted to do stuff outside. So his dad decided to sign him up for karate. He actually knew somebody who taught karate lessons. So basically what happened is that Jeff Dawson was training him karate, right? Not knowing that this whole time that he was giving him karate lessons, he was actually grooming him.
The son?
Yeah, he was grooming the son the whole time. And the thing is, he was also grooming the parents because he would make it seem like it was okay for them to be together alone. Sometimes he would go over his house by himself until one day, since they were so okay with it, he was like, yo, can I show your son my new carpet and shit? I wanted to show him the new carpet in the house. This fucking guy kidnapped their son, took him to a motel by Disneyland and stuff. He obviously, you already know what. Sometime later, he called the mom and he's like, yo, I got your kid. He's fine. He's okay. Not knowing that this whole time, the FBI, they tapped into the phone that she was using. So boom, the cops go to where he's at. He fucking gets arrested and shit. They take him in. The dad is obviously fucking devastated because he feels like he could have done something this whole time. He didn't know.
I mean, yeah, what parent wouldn't feel like, yo, I couldn't save my kid. I should have seen the signs.
And then one day he was at a bar and shit. He was getting drunk as fuck. And a news anchor, supervisor slash producer happened to be there as well. And he overheard him having a conversation with somebody else of saying that Jeff Dawson was going to be at the Baton Rouge airport at a certain time, certain place, whatever. That's when his plan came out.
To get a close-up shot of him.
Yes, you see him right there.
I didn't think we were going to see the actual footage.
So basically what he did is that he planned that whenever Jeff Dawson was going to come into the airport, he was already going to be there on the phone. And as soon as he got off the phone, he was going to turn around with his little muzzle revolver and he was going to shoot him right in the head. At this point, bro, the cops even said that he was drunk, sleep deprived because of how much he was thinking about this fucking shit, bro.
Bro got a headshot and he was out of it.
That's how you know he would do everything for his fucking kid, bro.
I would definitely do the same thing.
And the thing is, it was a trial for his thing, his murder and shit, right? Because he did murder a guy. Even though he did that shit to his son, he's still a killer now, right?
Yeah.
But then the town that he was in.
You won't believe what these parents did to their daughter, and before I begin, this is a massive trigger warning. This is Lacey Fletcher, and her parents let her rot away on their sofa in her own waste up to 12 years. 36-year-old Lacey Fletcher's body was found fused to the couch. Lacey was semi-naked and sitting upright in a sunken crevice in the sofa when she was found by police officers. She weighed 96 pounds and was covered in urine, feces, and maggots. Lacey was homeschooled since high school, suffered social anxiety, and had a severe case of Asperger's. But what makes this case so sinister is that Lacey had locked-in syndrome, which is when you're completely aware of everything going on around you, but you can't move any parts of your body except your eyes, and you can't talk. Meaning Lacey was sitting in this same position for 12 years in her own feces, urine, and maggots, completely aware of what's going on around her, but there's nothing she could do about it. All while her parents are living in the same house as her as she rots away. When the officers reached the house, they said the stench was so strong it almost made them puke. Lacey's body was completely surrounded and covered in feces and urine, and there were also severe ulcers on the body's underside. Her body also appeared completely rotten to the bone. She also appeared to have feces shoved in her face, chest, and stomach. But the sad thing about this case is that Lacey Fletcher's parents just completely gave up on her. Since she had locked-in syndrome, they just placed her on the couch and let her sit there for years on years on years, barely feeding her and never cleaning her. Her parents were in this house showering, cooking, and just relaxing, all while their daughter was rotting away slowly on the couch because of them. Can you just imagine having locked-in syndrome and being placed on a couch by your parents? And then you get neglected, starved, and ignored for years. And all you can do is just think in your own head about what's going on. Lacey could never ask her parents what they were doing because she couldn't talk. So you could only imagine the fear and anxiety Lacey was feeling throughout the 12 years she was stuck on the couch. This is one of the most sickening and inhumane cases ever, and may Lacey rest in peace.
Scarface actress vanished after she admitted that she saw something she shouldn't have. This is the unsolved haunting mystery of Tammy Lynn. Tammy Lynn Lepper was born in the 60s. She was absolutely stunning and worked as a model throughout her teenage years. She'd appeared on the front cover of CoverGirl magazine. Much like JonBenet Ramsey, she was entering beauty pageants from just 4 years old. Obviously used to the spotlight, in 1983, Tammy was 18 and started appearing in films. She had just finished shooting the movie Spring Break and one evening went alone to a house party. Strangely, her loved ones described her coming back from this party a completely different person. This appeared to be the start of a haunting turn of events for her loved ones. While she was acting in the movie Scarface, she suddenly returned home after the 4th day of filming. She had, according to her colleagues, been behaving erratically on set. She'd even told people she was fearing for her life. She seemed to have become really paranoid, and some people thought that this was due to mental health issues. She was refusing to eat out of open containers or drink from open cans. Fearing she was having delusions, her mum was obviously concerned about her well-being and took her to a doctor's to check her over. They kept her in to keep an eye on her, but she was discharged after 72 hours. They said there were no signs of substance use or a mental health issue. She was last seen in Florida on the 6th of July 1983. She was wearing a blue denim skirt. However, her mum noted that she hadn't even brushed her hair that day, which was very out of character for Tammy. She was with a male friend who later told investigators that the pair had had an argument and he dropped her off alone at a parking lot. She was spotted walking along the highway, and some witnesses said that she didn't even have any shoes on. She has never been seen again. Tammy's paranoia caused her mum to believe that her disappearance was sinister. She theorized that Tammy could have inadvertently been involved in a substance and money laundering ring. This could have been a motive for someone to want to get rid of her. Sadly, her mum died in 1995, and the mystery of Tammy Lynn's disappearance remains unsolved.
P. Diddy was finally just arrested tonight in New York City. Federal agents this evening placed Sean Combs under arrest. We're not going to know more about what's happening until the morning, but this is a major step towards progress. P. Diddy has been accused of some of the most disturbing crimes that I've read about in a very long time. Not only has he been accused of terrible things like sex trafficking, but he's also been accused of assaulting minors, videotaping him assaulting minors, drugging minors, assaulting staff members, friends, drugging people. I mean, he's literally done everything. And I seriously think that this man is a threat to society if he's out on the streets. But P. Diddy is just the head. P. Diddy, in my mind, is like the Epstein of this situation. Who knows who P. Diddy could have been pimping children or other adults out to. And I honestly wouldn't be surprised if P. Diddy ended up dead shortly in the near future. Or obviously takes his own life, kind of like Epstein. Anytime you have federal agents arresting somebody, you know that the charges are going to be really bad. But I'm sure that P. Diddy was in bed with the feds. I mean, look at Epstein. Epstein was a big CIA operation anyways. And something that's interesting is that the same Manhattan district attorney that handled the Jeffrey Epstein case inserted himself here and is now leading the case against P. Diddy. That DA position is really, really important when it comes to this stuff. And if a DA wants to instigate, let's say, a cover-up, they're one of the people that can actually put that sort of a thing into place. I don't think it's a coincidence that the same guy that helped cover up Epstein is now already starting to work on the case of P. Diddy, Sean Combs. I'm going to provide y'all with updates in the morning. I've talked about this case extensively. This guy is seriously a supervillain. He is a terrible human being. I am so unbelievably happy that he is now in cuffs. I've prayed for his arrest. But this is all a show anyways, you know? And like I said, he needs to really watch himself in prison. Because honestly, I wish that Epstein would have remained alive so that he could have exposed the machinations of these dark machines. But they got to him first. Who they are exactly, well, I think you know. But like I said, I'll keep you guys updated. This is crazy.
Last month, Samuel Clemens, a University of Missouri student, went missing, and 20-year-old Emma Adams has just been charged with his murder. On January 10th, Samuel's mom contacted the MU Police Department concerned after not hearing from him, and she asked them to conduct a welfare check. When they arrived at his dorm on campus at around 5:30 p.m., he wasn't there. Authorities then pieced together a timeline of his last movements via security footage, his university swipe card, and Uber, which they had found he had taken the night before. That, along with Samuel's last cell phone ping, led them to a house in North Columbia on the 2400 block of Bentley Court. When authorities arrived, Emma Adams opened the door. According to her, she had just woken up, but she invited the MUPD in to search the home and the backyard. Authorities stated that the odor of burning flesh was immediate. After a search of the backyard, authorities found Samuel's, quote, charred, smoldering remains on a mattress in a fire pit. His broken cell phone was then found in a sink full of water in the kitchen. According to a probable cause statement, Emma initially denied knowing anything about Samuel, but she eventually confessed to killing him. She stated that Samuel was beating her, so she stabbed him with a knife in self-defense, but she made no mention of why she burned his body in the backyard before falling asleep. Authorities also found a bloody pocket knife in the kitchen of the home, backing up her statement. Emma was arrested and charged with second-degree murder, in which she has since pleaded not guilty. She's also facing additional charges such as armed criminal action, tampering with physical evidence, and abandonment of a corpse. She's being held at the Boone County Jail on a $1 million cash-only bond and will reappear in court on February 16th. Samuel was 21 years old and on the autism spectrum. He was also a sophomore at MU studying biological sciences.
This is one of the hardest execution videos to watch explained. The video that I'm about to explain is a short one, but it's absolutely gut-turning. The video setting is in some sort of rainforest area, and as the video begins, Deborah Bessa, who is the victim on your screen right now, can be seen kneeling on the ground, and a man is standing behind her holding her hair. His face is covered and he's holding a machete. The look on Deborah's face is complete fear and worry as she awaits her grisly demise. She is then pulled to the ground by the guy with the machete and lets out a haunting scream. Deborah is lying on her side, almost in a fetal position now, and the killer then takes the machete and tries to slash the side of her neck with it, but struggles as Deborah tries her best to defend herself, while letting out ear-piercing screams. A second man then enters the shot carrying what looks like a kitchen knife, and he then begins to stab Deborah in her side and around her ribcage area. She reacts with a short, sharp scream and then lies on her back after she is stabbed. The man with the machete then begins slashing at her throat as Deborah screams and screams and screams. And while this is happening, the man with the kitchen knife begins stabbing her in the stomach. And instinctively, she tries to move her hand to protect herself from the stabbings, but the killer stabs through her hand and into her stomach. After a few seconds, she stops screaming but is still moving as she is being stabbed and beheaded by the killers. The man with the machete then stands up and hits Deborah in the throat with the machete, which makes a cracking type sound, which means he most likely hit her spine with the blade. He then hits her again and again, and after the second strike, it appears Deborah vomits, but it comes out of her slashed throat instead of her mouth. He then hits her a couple more times and her body freezes up as her spinal cord is severed, and it appears the beheading has been completed and the video concludes. 2 of the 3 killers in this video have been arrested, and this video was used as evidence. This video is absolutely horrific, and some consider it one of the worst ones out there, and I can see why. Just the pure evil and brutality in this video is enough to make you look away. Never go searching for this video because you will regret it immediately.
Child sex tourism is a major problem, so let's expose some people that engage in it. If you don't know what child sex tourism is, it's basically rich, older men and women flying to foreign countries to engage in acts with children. Then they fly back to America or whatever country they're based in and they face no legal repercussions. This is a massive problem and nobody talks about it. So, let me introduce you to Orville Mader. Orville was a teacher from Canada. So Orville was convicted in 2007 for paying to assault an 8-year-old boy in Thailand. He had also been previously put into jail in Cambodia for assaulting boys aged 11 and 14. So this guy was a serial offender. And even though he was going to these countries, being convicted of these crimes in these countries, when he flew back to Canada, he was facing no repercussions. None at all. He basically got a free pass. So keep in mind his last conviction was in 2007. Fast forward to 2022 though, he's arrested again. As it turns out, the Canadian government has been letting him fly to foreign countries all that he wants. They were not keeping tabs on him even though he's a convicted sex offender with multiple underage victims. And this time he was arrested in the Philippines for paying $15 to assault an 11-year-old boy. I have to be careful with how graphic I am here on this TikTok, but you know what assault means. This was a major failure from the Canadian Justice Department. I mean, these are the people that give convicted pedophiles with hundreds of victims only a couple years in prison. So I'm really genuinely not surprised. But I'm really hoping these charges stick this time. And I mean, this guy is definitely deserving of a life sentence at minimum. Not only has he shown that he will reoffend if he's let out, but he's dangerous. And nobody's talking about this. Nobody wants you to know about this. And it's just disturbing to me to think how many people are probably doing what this guy did and they're just never getting caught. Hopefully with this series of TikToks I can help raise some awareness about this problem. because this is unbelievably disturbing and I've really never seen anybody speaking about this.
This is the case of Dr. Death.
Dr. Death?
The only reason why he got caught was because he got messy. His name was Dr. Harold Shipman. He was even in a documentary for BBC about like taking care of the human body, being a good doctor and stuff like that. And he ended up opening Shipman's medical practice, which is his own medical practice, right? But he also had a weirdly high percentage of deaths in his patients.
How much?
A total of 215 confirmed killings. Every single death that he would write down, the way that they would die is that he walked in on them dead, or that he left to go get something from his car
And they're dead.
So it was always this abrupt death until one time Kathleen Grundy, she wasn't really like sick or anything like that, but obviously she was old, so she was getting taken care of by Dr. Harold Shipman. He put in the death certificate, died of old age. Also, what basically just f***ed everything up, and why he got sloppy, out of nowhere Kathleen Grundy's will comes out saying, my family isn't in need, I want to leave all my estate to the doctor.
That makes no sense. What the fuck?
And when you have a will, you have to have witnesses sign to make sure that this statement is legit. The daughter ends up going to the witnesses to see if they actually signed. Turns out
none of them signed.
That's when the cops finally arrested him after they ended up doing a analysis on her body, an actual autopsy. Because what he would do is he wouldn't get autopsies on the bodies. He would just write that they died of old age, and then instead of telling the family members, yo, we should get an autopsy of why they died, they would just send them to the morgue to get cremated.
Damn, so this motherfucker was like already on this shit. What the fuck?
Basically, they determined that Kathleen Grundy had died of overdose of morphine. They ended up doing like...
Imagine enjoying Christmas Eve with friends at a pub when a gunman opens fire. That's exactly what happened in Merseyside in 2022. For one family, it meant the start of an agonising battle for justice for their loved one. It was nearly midnight and beautiful 26-year-old Ellie Edwards was enjoying the festivities with friends at the Lighthouse pub. The place was packed with people having a great time. That was until a masked gunman crept round the wall of the pub and started showering bullets into the crowd. He sped off in what we now know to be a stolen car, and the pub goers were understandably horrified. Ellie was struck by a bullet and tragically passed away. Another man was critically injured and several others hurt. After being told that his daughter had been killed, Tim Edwards was understandably heartbroken. He would go on TV to plead with the public for any information to help identify his daughter's killer. What followed was an agonising pursuit of justice for Ellie's family and the local community. Ellie was a completely random, innocent victim of horrific gang violence. So how exactly did investigators track down who was responsible? Find out on Crimes That Shook Britain, Mondays at 9, starting tonight, the 16th of September. It's an absolute must-watch, and you can find it on the Crime and Investigation channel or stream it now on Crime and Investigation Play. I'll pop a link in my bio for more on Crimes That Shook Britain.
A Paria diving incident is one of the most disturbing things that I've ever read about. Like, just imagine being sucked into an underwater pipeline coated in oil and being stuck there for days until you die. On February 25th, 2022, 5 divers employed by LMCS began an underwater maintenance exercise on a U-shaped oil pipeline that was not currently in use. The area where they were working was called Berth 6, and it was where oil would enter the refinery. And this was all located off the coast of Trinidad and Tobago. These were private contractors hired by Paria Fuel, which is a government-owned oil company. The divers were Faisal Kurbin, Kazim Ali Jr., Rishi Nagazar, Yusuf Henry, and Christopher Boudrum. To start the maintenance on the pipeline, the divers first needed to drain the ocean water from the chamber, so that's what they did. And then they were able to remove their diving gear and begin working. Their job was to remove an inflatable plug, which separated the oil in the pipe from the air and water around it. But once they removed the plug, it created what's called a delta P hazard, which is basically a tornado of water within the pipeline that created a vacuum and sucked all 5 of the men into the pipe under extreme pressure. What you're about to see is the actual video footage from that day of the divers working before everything goes black. You can then hear them all being sucked into the pipe, trying to figure out what just happened.
Ahí, no. Ahí, no. I am 35 too. I can't come up. Yeah.
After what seemed like forever, the tornado of water finally died down, and all 5 of the men realized what had just happened. It was so quick, and they were so disoriented from being thrown around, and it was also pitch black inside of the pipeline, so they had no idea where exactly they were. They were all badly injured with broken bones and damaged organs, but somehow they were all still alive. They were trapped in oil and water, but managed to find air pockets to breathe. Thinking about being stuck in a pipe like this is horrifying, but this pipe in specific was coated in thick oil sludge, and with their injuries paired with this, it was almost impossible for the men to move inside the pipe. Because of how they were sucked in and because it was complete darkness, the men had no idea which way to go to try and get out. To put it into perspective, the pipeline was 1,200 feet long, and nobody knew how far the men were actually sucked in. On top of this, their diving gear was also sucked in, and their air tanks became lodged and almost completely blocked them in. Now, you'd think that with the workers being monitored from shore, that management would have seen what happened and immediately started looking for the men, but it would take them nearly an hour to even report a distress signal, so it was up to the men to save themselves, which is what they tried to do. According to Christopher, the 5 men formed a human chain to try and get out of the pipe, but 3 of the men's injuries were so bad that they couldn't move in all of the thick oil sludge. So Christopher and Kazim were the only 2 that could move, and as they slowly inched their way up, the air pockets got smaller and smaller due to the sea level rising. But halfway through, Kazim's injuries got worse, so he told Christopher to use up the last of the oxygen in one of the tanks and to go and get help for everyone. So Christopher put the oxygen tank in front of him and pushed it along, and as he started to reach the surface, he was concerned that he was going to berth 5 and not berth 6 where the work was being done. And if that was the case, there would be an inflatable plug in the way, meaning he wouldn't be able to escape and would run out of oxygen and drown. But luckily it was berth 6, and he was able to escape after 3 hours of being stuck inside of the pipe. Once rescued, he told authorities that all 4 of the other men were injured, but luckily still alive. So rescue divers dove down to the pipeline, but unfortunately they didn't know where exactly the men were stuck, because they weren't able to go more than 120 feet inside the pipe. The 4 men still stuck inside could hear the rescue divers tapping on the pipe, and they were all relieved that they were soon going to be rescued. But sadly, that was not the case. Authorities used cameras and underwater crawlers to assess the pipeline and to try and locate where the men were. But Priya's terminal operations manager refused to let anyone rescue the remaining 4 men. He said this was to prevent anyone else from losing their lives. Priya didn't even attempt to contact any other agency for help or use any life-saving equipment, and because of this, the Coast Guard said that there wasn't enough information to enter the pipeline. The company then released a statement saying that the probability of survival was extremely low at this point and that the risk of rescue was intolerable. For 3 days, the 4 men were stuck inside of this pipe alive, covered in oil and breathing in toxic air. Only a few hundred feet from rescue, just waiting for help to come. But it never did. And sadly, all 4 men died days later. Their bodies wouldn't be recovered until almost a week later. An investigation into the incident took place, which blamed Korea's operating procedures, and the fact that they refused to allow urgent rescue. The investigation recently found that the company should be tried for gross negligence and corporate manslaughter. But as of today, no charges have been filed in this tragedy.
This is the Wagner execution, one of the most controversial execution videos explained. The video that I'm about to explain was uploaded on Telegram and it went pretty viral. It begins by showing the victim in a dark room with his head taped to concrete blocks on the wall. Behind him, a man holding a sledgehammer and wearing camouflage clothes can be seen. Dimitri, who is the victim, then says, "I went to the front part of the Wagner group, but while I was on the front line, I realized this isn't my war. Today, I was on the streets of Dnipro where I was then hit in the head and lost consciousness. And when I woke up, I was in this room where they told me I would be put on trial." After he reads this statement, his head, which is taped to the concrete blocks on the wall, is hit extremely hard by the man with the sledgehammer in the side of his head, which crushes his head completely and causes his body to fall back on his back. The killer then continues to smash into the face of Dimitri over and over. But the weird part about this video, and what makes it extremely controversial, is that a second video was posted of Dimitri claiming that the Wagner group spared his life. He said, "In Wagner, everyone has the right to correct his mistake. When I got to captivity, I told a lot of stuff, but I'm still ashamed. But it was my only option to stay alive. When I got back from captivity, I brought back valuable intel which saved many lives of our boys, and for that reason I have been forgiven." This has mostly everybody doubting the authenticity of the video, and many people think it's just an attempt to troll the Wagner group, and others suggesting the video might just be completely staged. But whatever the truth is, I doubt we will ever find out. It's just weird that the man that was executed on video was then seen in another video saying that his life was spared. I don't know, it's just odd, but nonetheless, this video is still extremely brutal and graphic, and I don't recommend searching for it.
Imagine renting an Airbnb and when you get there you find a dead body. This genuinely sounds like the script of a far-fetched horror film, but for one group of people, it was all too real. It was February 2016. A group arrived at an Airbnb for the weekend. It was a beautiful winter's afternoon at the property in Palaiseau in the southern suburbs of France. The rented accommodation was nestled in gorgeous woodlands, but it would be here that the horrific discovery was made. The group started exploring the property as you would do with any rented accommodation. They wanted to see what the surroundings were like. However, they stumbled upon something absolutely terrifying. Lay in the open was a human corpse that was, quote, in an advanced state of decomposition. The body was surrounded by logs and had been partially covered by branches. It was a female body that had clothes on and a ring, but unfortunately no identifiable documentation anywhere on their person. Obviously, immediately law enforcement turned up and started interviewing all of the guests at the Airbnb that weekend. The property was very quickly taken off Airbnb while police started to investigate. They were trying to identify the woman, but as far as I can see online, they couldn't determine a cause of death. She had not been identified, and the body in the Airbnb remains a chilling mystery.
This teacher in Texas was fired after she defended pedophiles in class. This is Amber Parker from El Paso, Texas. She was 53 years old when this happened. A couple of years ago, Amber was caught on camera by a student in her class saying that they shouldn't refer to pedophiles as pedophiles. She told her students instead we should call them MAPs, or minor attracted persons. The video, honestly, is incredibly disturbing to me. I'm going to read you a quote from the video. Parker said, "Stop calling them pedophiles. You're not allowed to label people like that. Stop it, Diego. We're not going to call them that." She then added, "We're going to call them MAPs, minor attracted persons. So don't judge people just because they want to have sex with a 5-year-old. I mean, what goes through a person's mind when they make a comment like that to a class full of underage kids? It's absolutely reprehensible to me. And if there's one group of people that I have no empathy for myself, it's pedophiles who target young, vulnerable children. Now, when this video came out, this was huge national, international news, and immediately she was put on leave. After a while, the school district had some meetings, and they came back and terminated her position as a teacher, meaning that she would no longer be leading a class in discussions like this. I'm genuinely curious about this. What do you guys, the people who watch my TikToks, think we should refer to these people as? Should we call them MAPs? Or should we call them what I think we should call them, pedophiles? Comment your answer. I'm genuinely curious.
Show you guys, I'm gonna show him a video. So the caption says she wanted everyone to split the bill for her B-Day dinner.
You expect us to split the bill?
You got lamb chop, you got steak, you got some other.
Look at all that. Look at what all they got. And they talking about
What
splitting the
did you
bill.
come out for? What did you come out for?
We come together, we
Alright, I'm
split the
finna
bill.
go again.
We have always split the bill, and me, because I don't really eat that much. Like I don't drink. I just get one thing and that's it. I don't complain about it because when we do it, I don't really mind.
But you don't like splitting the bill.
I personally don't like to split in the bill. If I only get something that's like $20-something and everybody else got like obviously
$50-$60,
$50-$60 because of their drinks and other shit.
Me personally, I like paying for what I get because I know I usually get more stuff than everybody else.
At least you're like aware that you order mashed.
So it's kind of like, bro, if somebody only got a sandwich that was $10, $20, why would they spend more for us? You know what I'm saying, bro?
Imagine like one day, right? We go out to dinner. There's like 15 of us. Bill comes out to $2,000. It's like, what? I'm gonna do the math real quick. So like 135, I guess, round up.
135? That's not even that much.
I mean, it's a lie if you only got something that's worth like $50.
Oh yeah, 150 is a lot. That's
$100, bro.
Yeah.
However, according to the phrase, you can't make this stuff up, might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
Have you ever wondered how accurate progression photos are? Progression photos are what detectives use on people that went missing years and years ago to kind of guess what they would look like today. So I'm going to show you some photos of missing children, what their progression photo looked like, and what they actually looked like when they were found. And if you're new to my page, I do all sorts of true crime and ghost stories, so make sure you're following along. So here's the first one. Here's two kids that went missing when they were children. And here's what detectives guessed they would look like as they got older. But here's what they actually looked like when they were found. As you can tell, like the hair color is wrong, general face shape is kind of right. I guess on the little boy it's more accurate, but these look like pretty much completely different people. So here's another one. Here's a baby that went missing. And this is what detectives thought he might look like when he got older, and granted, it's so hard to do this on babies. As you can tell, he doesn't really look anything like what his progression photo looked like when he was eventually found, but this little girl below has some similar features to what they thought she would look like as she got older. I'm so happy that this group of kids got found, but it's also proof that you need to find kids as quickly as possible because they just start looking so different so quickly.
This tenant lived in a luxury home for a year and a half for free and insists that the landlord pay her $100,000. Elizabeth Horstrand rented this stunning Airbnb guest house in LA that's worth $3.5 million but decided to overstay without paying. She says she has the right to be there, but everyone seems pretty upset about this entire situation. Elizabeth's been staying since September 2021, but the agreement was that she stay for 6 months, so instead she asked the landlord to pay her $100,000 so that she can relocate. A judge ruled that the landlord has no legal reason to evict Elizabeth from the home due to the city's rent laws, which absolutely sucks. And then Elizabeth's attorney argued that she wasn't required to pay rent because the home had never been officially approved by the city for someone to live there. And she also claimed that the shower was built without a permit. Elizabeth has made it very difficult for the landlord to enter his own house, and he even offered to pay for her hotel stay, which she declined. He called Elizabeth a tenant from hell, and he filed a lawsuit to evict her, and finally she was forced out of the home this month. So my question to you guys is, do you think Elizabeth's reasoning was valid, or is she out of her mind?
Imagine being so scared of police that you freeze to death. Brandon Bushman was a 34-year-old man living in Minnesota. On June the 26th, 2023, something horrific was revealed. Police responded to a call asking them to attend a property that hadn't been lived in since around February 2023. Just after 3:30 p.m, police found Brandon's body inside of a chest freezer in the property. Now, witnesses had seen police in the local area and spotted Brandon run from the upstairs of the house. It's believed that he had a warrant outstanding for his arrest, and it's believed he was trying to evade police. In doing so, he ran to the freezer of the property, presumably hoping to hide there for a short amount of time. However, after climbing into the basement freezer by choice, tragically due to it being an older model of freezer, it had no facility to be opened from the inside. It had a latching mechanism on the outside of the freezer only. Tragically, Brandon was trapped. He couldn't escape the freezer. He was found deceased, and the autopsy showed no evidence of him having any prior injuries or trauma to his body.
I served my customers human flesh burgers in my restaurant. My name is Joe Metney, also known as the Cannibal. I killed and dismembered about 10 women, turning them into hamburgers. It all began in 1995. I was searching for my son, whose custody had been taken away by my ex-wife a year earlier. Under a bridge in Baltimore, I encountered 2 homeless individuals who were using drugs with my ex. Enraged, I killed them with an axe. I also killed a fisherman, fearing he might be a witness, then disposed of the 3 bodies in the river nearby. A few months later, I came across 2 prostitutes. Like a butcher, I turned them into meat, which I stored in Tupperware containers placed in the freezer. The remains were buried in small graves I had dug in the woods. In the following weeks, I sold human meat hamburgers on the side of the road from a trailer. Since the taste of human flesh is very similar to that of pork, no one could tell the difference. Whenever I ran out of meat, I sought new victims among the homeless and prostitutes, luring them with promises of drugs or easy money to create my horrifying recipe of human meat. It was in 1996 that I was convicted and sentenced, and on August 5th, 2017, I died in prison.
I keep seeing a lot of online discourse about the new Netflix Jeffrey Dahmer show and if it's actually exploitative, so let's take a little deeper look. Recently, it came out that one of Jeffrey Dahmer's victims' siblings learned that the show was coming out when everyone else did. Her name's Rita Isbell, and her brother was Errol Lindsay, and they use her likeness and name in the show pretty explicitly. Rita was known pretty publicly at the time for her outburst during the Jeffrey Dahmer trial, and you can see here, the show makes no bones about using her exact likeness and outburst to profit, and Rita is not partaking in any of the profit shares of this show. Personally, and this is just me, I also think the show makes a very specific choice by casting Evan Peters as Jeffrey Dahmer. Evan has a really specific online fan base of young girls who idolize the psychotic characters he plays. So it's not shocking to me that people are watching this show and tweeting insanities like this. The show is #1 on Netflix right now, meaning it's one of the most watched shows in the whole world. So I can't imagine being a victim's family member because it's everywhere. And though both Evan Peters and the show's creator Ryan Murphy have come out and said that they didn't want the show to be about Jeffrey Dahmer, they wanted it to be about the victims, there's not really a lot being done right now for the victims or their families. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments if you've seen it.
You'll never know my name, but I scared the hell out of California in the late 60s with a wave of enigmatic murders. Known as the Zodiac Killer, I was responsible for no less than 37 serial murders between the late 60s and early 70s. This nickname refers to the logo of the Zodiac watch brand, similar to the symbol I used to sign my murders, a target site in a Celtic cross. I was active in Northern California and used to attack young couples in their cars at night in isolated locations. I killed several of my victims with a pistol and coldly murdered a couple, Cecilia Shepard and Brian Hartnell, by stabbing them several times. It was a night in September 1969, the 27th to be precise. Wearing a balaclava and my fetish symbol, I approached them and threatened them with a gun. I asked Cecilia to tie up her husband, then tied him up in turn. Afterwards, I had a long talk with them, announcing that I was about to stab them, which I did, stabbing Brian 8 times and Cecilia 10 times. I then carved the following inscriptions on Brian's car door with a knife. For several years, I sent letters to the local press containing messages encrypted with strange symbols, all of which have been deciphered to date. The latest was by a French cryptologist who claims that I am Lawrence Kane, one of the known suspects in the case, now deceased. I have inspired several books and a multitude of films and TV series. Today, the mystery of my identity remains inexplicable.
An unsettling clue was discovered in the case of the missing woman and the mysterious road trip. Gwen Brunel is a 27-year-old from Idaho. She left her home on June the 26th to embark on a solo road trip and was last seen on CCTV. She told her family that she would stay in regular contact with them, but shortly after starting the road trip, her phone was shut off. Bizarrely, she told her boyfriend a story about what she planned on doing. She bought 11 show rabbits and told her boyfriend that she was going to California to meet a rabbit judge for training. She'd packed up the rabbits with enough food and water for them for about a week. However, the rabbit judge in question stated that they never heard of her and never made any plans to meet with Gwen. Gwen was spotted at a small shop just 20 miles from her home. This was on the day that she left on the road trip, and strangely, she was captured on camera wearing different clothes than the clothes she left her house in. Also strangely, as the place was just 20 miles away from her home, it took her 3 hours to get there. She was then seen the day after at a petrol station in Jordan Valley, Oregon. She then went across the road to buy some snacks and reportedly told a member of staff that she was in a hurry. The member of staff, though, then saw her sitting in her car outside for an hour. She vanished and her parents reported her missing. Disturbingly, her car was found abandoned in Malheur County, about half a mile from the highway. Her keys and possessions were still in the car along with the 11 rabbits. Tragically, 5 of the rabbits had passed away from the heat. There was a huge search in the area to try and find the missing girl, but no luck. 2 months later, though, there was a disturbing clue. Her t-shirt was found tangled in a barbed wire fence near Dog Creek. Her boots were also then recovered not far away from the t-shirt. Police say there was no sign of an abduction, but why would she leave those rabbits to die? All of her family and friends said how much she loved rabbits and that she would never leave them in harm's way. Police are encouraging anyone with any information to come forwards.
Groomed by a man more than 3 times her age, Kellyanne Bates was only 14 when she met the man that would end her life in what still remains one of the most horrific murders in the UK. Quick trigger warning, some of the details in the video are quite graphic and hard to listen to. James Patterson Smith was an extremely violent man. On the outside, he looked perfectly normal and was actually described by friends as well-groomed and house-proud. He'd been in a few relationships before meeting Kelly, but they'd all ended due to his violent temper. He'd even tried to drown 2 of his previous girlfriends. And at the age of 46, he met 14-year-old Kelly while she was babysitting for some of his friends. Their relationship was kept a secret by Kelly and James for 2 years, but at the age of 16, when she left school, she moved in with him. When Kelly's parents finally met James, they were shocked by his age, and Kelly's mum did everything she could to try and persuade Kelly to leave the relationship. As the months went on, Kelly became more and more withdrawn, and eventually all contact between her and her family stopped. On April 16, 1996, the police received a call from James saying that he'd accidentally drowned his girlfriend in the bath. When they arrived at the house, they found blood throughout the rooms, and Kelly's naked body was in the bedroom. It became quite clear that this was not an accidental death. Kelly had drowned in the bath, but only after enduring up to a month of torture at the hands of James. Kelly had over 150 injuries in total. She'd been tied up with a ligature around her neck, she had burns to her legs, a fractured arm, multiple stab wounds from knives, scissors and forks. Her hands were crushed, she had stab wounds inside her mouth, she'd been partially scalped, and she had 2 empty eye sockets. Kelly had endured all of these injuries in the weeks leading up to her death, before finally being dragged to the bathroom and drowned. James was quickly arrested but denied murder, saying that Kelly had inflicted all these injuries on herself to make him look bad. He then changed his story and said that it was him, but that Kelly had taunted him and dared him to do it. It only took the jury 1 hour to find him guilty, and he was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 20 years. In January 2023, he actually became eligible for parole, but it was denied and he remains behind bars.
This is one of the worst cases in human history. This is the murder of Christine Siloan. She was from the Philippines and was a volunteer in church, and she used the church every day from 4 to 6 p.m. On the day of her murder, she went to church as per her schedule, but she didn't come home after that. Her parents then started to worry and they began searching for her with their neighbors. And what they found is absolutely horrid. They found her body in a farm where half her face was sliced like a piece of pizza, and her face was literally skinned down to her skull. Also, her brain was completely destroyed by acid. The police then started investigating, and they checked the cameras and found out that she was with a guy. The people started protesting about this case, and the case was then given to special officers. They had a lot of pressure on this. A week before this happened, she broke up with her boyfriend, so the police took him into custody. And he was proving that he was at home all day when she was murdered, but officers were completely tired of this case, and they then sentenced him as the murderer. But after a few months, a thief was caught in a store where he confessed that he murdered and raped Christine. He said he started talking to her on Facebook with a fake account and was using fake photos of another guy that was pretty good looking. Christine fell for the guy, and she assumed that he was about 20 years old, and they started texting daily. One day, they both decided to meet up at 6 p.m. near the church she went to. But upon arriving, Christine noticed that this was not the guy she was talking to, and he was around 40-ish years old. She then refused to talk to him and tried to go back, but he held her hands extremely forcefully. He then took her far away from town and raped her repeatedly and put iron rods inside her personal organs. He then cut her face in half and then skinned her whole head down to the skull. And to make it even worse, he put acid inside of her head. The autopsy also revealed that her tongue, trachea, esophagus, parts of her neck, and her right ear were missing. The self-proclaimed killer of this case, named Renato Lanis, said that he used barber-type scissors and stabbed her 30 times on different parts of her body and skinned her face. Christine Siloan was only 16 years old, and this case is extremely haunting. There's a picture of her body that was found in the field, but Google did a really good job of not showing it and hiding it. So even if you do go looking for the picture, I don't think you're going to find it. This is one of those cases that after you get done reading it, you just feel some sort of uneasiness. I feel so bad for Christine's family, and I can't imagine finding my daughter in this state. May Christine Silouan rest in peace.
This is Mr. Swirl, one of the worst pedophiles in world history. And let me tell you, this story is really disturbing, so viewer discretion is advised. So this is Mr. Swirlface himself, Christopher Paul Neal. He was born in Canada in 1975. So Christopher had a pretty unremarkable childhood, but it should be stated here that he wanted to become a Catholic priest. But after the seminary denied him because he wasn't properly qualified, he decided to become a teacher instead. So Christopher eventually moved out of Canada. He moved to South Korea. That's where he was employed as a teacher. And suddenly, all of these images of CP started circulating around the internet. Christopher appeared in over 200 images of CP that he produced himself. And in every photo that he produced, he always put this swirly effect over his face, thinking that it would obscure his identity. Well, eventually German computer experts were able to unswirl the image. They produced this image to the left, and a number of people who knew Christopher contacted Interpol and told them, this is that guy. So once he was identified, Christopher fled to Thailand. That's where he decided he would make his great getaway. And while he was living in Thailand, he employed the services of a young boy who would go out to local internet cafes and bring Christopher other young boys that he would abuse and take photos of. But this didn't last long and obviously didn't work out for Christopher. In the year 2007, towards the end of the year, he was finally arrested by the Thai police. There's nothing that brings me more joy than seeing all these officers around this guy. And one thing that should be noted about Christopher is his unrepentant nature when he's photographed. You'll see what I mean. Pictures like these were taken by the press when he was finally arrested and brought to justice. So in Thailand, Christopher was sentenced to 39 months in prison and he was handed a $1,700 plus fine. But he later admitted to the crime, he was eventually released, and then he returned to Canada. Upon his return to Canada, he was immediately arrested at the Vancouver International Airport. Now, while Christopher was in Canada, CP was found on his phone and laptop. He was sentenced to a number of years in prison. But in March of 2017, Christopher was released from prison, and he now lives in Vancouver somewhere, according to the internet. That's right, Mr. Swirlyface is currently out on the streets. I didn't know this. I think this is an absolute injustice to all the victims of this guy. This is absolutely a horrific story, and I cannot believe he's not serving more time for appearing in over 200 images of CP. It's crazy. But yeah, let me know below. Do you think this guy should still be in prison? I'm also going to be starting a true crime series talking about murders, conspiracies, all of the above on my YouTube channel, The Paranormal Files, so go subscribe if you don't already. But yeah, this story is unbelievable and sickening.
What? Look in there, mate. Look in there. What? Look in there.
This father and son were brutally murdered on camera by the cartel. Before I get started, I just want to say this is definitely the worst cartel video on the internet. The video that I'm about to explain to you was uploaded sometime in 2018. The setting of the video is in some sort of forest. The video begins with both men kneeling on the ground with their hands tied and their mouths gagged. The father and son are then questioned by their captors, and soon after the father is beaten by what looks like a 2x4 or something along the lines of a big wooden stick. And when I say beaten, I mean beaten. They are not taking it easy on him at all. Soon after this, the father is decapitated right in front of his son with a knife. The knife isn't too big, but the worst part about this whole video is the son's reaction to watching his dad get beheaded. He was crying hysterically and wailing as you would expect, but it really stuck with me because it's a different kind of crying I've never heard before. The father, who is now beheaded, is completely covered in blood and is obviously dead. His son continues to cry hysterically, but what's about to happen to him is absolutely sickening. Please never go looking for this video because what I'm about to explain is extremely disturbing. After decapitating and killing the father, they move on to the son, but they don't decapitate him. They actually begin to flay him, which is far more painful and a prolonged way to die. This is how they tortured people back in the medieval times. The killers basically take knives and just start slicing off the skin from the boy's chest down to his abdomen, and completely skin him alive. They remove all the skin in that area as well as huge pieces of flesh, and throughout this whole process, the son was alive and conscious. He would sometimes drift in and out of consciousness from the pain and loss of blood, I would assume. Sometimes he would appear lifeless, and other times he would react to what they were doing to him. It got to the point where they skinned the boy so much that you could literally see his organs moving, and they started removing them. For example, you could see his lungs inflate and deflate. It's honestly just horrifying to watch. The killers then take a knife and cut out the son's heart and hold it up to the camera. And the heart is still beating continuously. They then hold it up for a few seconds and the video then concludes. I really urge you to not go looking for this video because it's truly a sickening video that nobody should have ever seen. I've never seen anything this horrendous and inhumane in my life, and trust me, you don't want to either. There's something about hearing a son whimper and scream watching his dad get decapitated that really made me feel uneasy. It really can't be described or recreated. This is by far the worst cartel execution video out there, and rest in peace to this father and son. Nobody deserves to go this way. This is the gruesome case of Linda Spence Explained. Linda Spence was working as a financial advisor in Scotland and was reportedly involved in some shady dealings, accepting multiple deposits from elderly people for flats which were never built. In 2010, 27-year-old Linda Spence began to negotiate a deal for what she claimed was a valuable parcel of land near Stansted Airport, and as part of this deal, she produced some handmade bond certificates she claimed were issued by the government of Denmark. She attracted an investment of £80,000 from Colin Coates, a man with something of a reputation for being involved in criminal enterprise. While looking for further investors for her project, she traveled to the United States, where the fraudulent bonds caught the attention of the FBI, and she quickly left the country. Linda's house of cards was beginning to crumble around her when she returned to Scotland, and she ignored repeated attempts at contact from Mr. Coates, who was beginning to be concerned about his investment. Coates then took matters into his own hands by snatching Linda from the streets of Glasgow in April 2011. Coates hired 2 associates to watch Linda while she was held captive. Linda's disappearance was investigated by police, who quickly identified Coates as a person of interest based off their financial dealings. However, Coates denied any involvement in her disappearance, and the investigation appeared to stall. At this point, Linda's family has become aware of her sketchy dealings and maintained hope she had simply just fled the country. However, Coates was eventually betrayed by a witness who became concerned for his life due to his knowledge of the crime and Coates' constant threats to silence him. He then went to the police, naming Coates as her kidnapper, and gave the names of the associates who had guarded Linda during her ordeal. Upon being arrested, the 2 associates agreed to give evidence against Coates in return for reduced sentences. They reported that Linda was kept alive for over 2 weeks, during which time she was humiliated and tortured by Coates. She was tied to a chair and forced to sit in her own waste, had her thumb cut off, her kneecaps shattered with golf clubs, her feet completely crushed, and her hands completely burnt with an iron. Coates' associates both claimed they did not witness Linda's eventual murder, but believed that Colin Coates decapitated her and put her body in the boot of his car. In the days after Linda was believed to have been killed, Coates asked a friend to borrow his boat, but was turned down. Colin Coates was found guilty of Linda Spence's murder, but has also denied any involvement. Linda's body has still never been found, despite ongoing extensive searches by the police of Scotland. And they say this case will not be closed until Linda is found. This case is absolutely sickening, but Linda Spence did steal $80,000 from a man who was known to be involved in criminal activity. Not saying she deserved what happened to her at all, I'm just saying she messed with the wrong person and got the full consequence of it. Rest in peace to Linda Spence, and I hope her body is found soon.
It's shocking to think that there are actually people out there capable of doing something like this to another human being. This is the murder of 12-year-old Shanda Sharer, who was literally burned alive by a group of teenagers. In 1991, Shanda was attending Hazelwood Middle School in New Albany. In October that year, Shanda attended a school dance with fellow student Amanda Heverin. Amanda had recently been in a relationship with another girl, 16-year-old Melinda Lovelace, and on Melinda seeing her with Shanda, she became extremely jealous. Melinda began making threats, even telling other students that she would kill Shanda. On January 10th, 1992, Melinda enlisted the help of 3 friends, 17-year-old Laurie and 2 15-year-olds Hope and Tony. They drove over to Shanda's dad's house where Shanda was staying and told her that Amanda wanted to see her and they'd give her a lift. She couldn't see Melinda hiding under a blanket in the back seat, so she went with them. As they started driving, Melinda jumped out from under the blanket with a knife, and she threatened to slit Shanda's throat if she didn't confess to stealing Amanda from her. Shanda was actually too terrified to speak, and Melinda ordered the other girls to drive to a remote trash dump in the forest. They thought that she was just trying to scare Shanda, but they were dead wrong. Melinda dragged Shanda from the car and started to slam her knee into Shanda's face until she was covered in blood. Laurie then joined in with the attack while Hope and Tony stayed behind in the car. Melinda and Laurie then tried to slit Shanda's throat, but the knife wasn't sharp enough, so they stabbed her in the chest, strangled her, and then threw her into the trunk of the car thinking that she was dead. They then went back to Laurie's house to clean up, and they heard Shanda screaming from the trunk of the car. When they realised she was still alive, Laurie ran out with the knife and stabbed her a few more times. She then drove off with Melinda to carry on torturing Shanda, this time with a tire iron. They then drove to a gas station and filled a 2-litre bottle with gasoline. Shanda was then wrapped in a blanket naked and set on fire. Shanda was actually still alive at this point, and the girls drove off while she burnt to death. Melinda then ordered them to go back a few minutes later, pour more gasoline on her, and make sure she was dead. The 4 girls then went and ate McDonald's breakfast and laughed about what they'd just done, comparing Shanda's burnt body to one of the sausages that they were eating. Later that day, Shanda's burnt remains were found, and Hope and Tony couldn't handle the guilt anymore, so they went to the police with their parents and spilled the whole story. All 4 girls were arrested and tried as adults. Tony was sentenced to 20 years but served only 9 and was released in 2000. Hope received 35 years but served only 14 and was released in 2006. Melinda and Laurie were both sentenced to 60 years but were released in 2018 and 2019.
This creepy doctor might be the worst pedophile in American history. Time to expose him. In 2010, Dr. Earl Bradley from Delaware was convicted on 471 charges of raping and molesting over 100 children. This story is actually really sad. So Earl was from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and after graduating from medical school, he practiced in Philadelphia, where I live, at the Jefferson Hospital. But this is where the story is so sad. So in 1994, he was accused of sexual misconduct dealing with a child. The hospital claimed to have investigated this claim, and they found there was nothing to the claim. Then in 1995, he was accused again of sexual misconduct with the child. Once again, the hospital tried to investigate, and they found that nothing had happened. They didn't believe the accusers. But after these allegations, Earl couldn't continue to work in Philadelphia, so he moved to Delaware. And that's where he opened this creepy clinic of his that's infamous now, known as Babies. And this is where the story takes an even darker turn. So, Babies was a pediatric clinic that Earl Bradley ran. It was decorated super creepily, looked like a carnival. It had all these child-themed decorations, and it looked really innocent. He had a giant Buzz Lightyear statue that greeted kids when they walked into the clinic. And the whole office had this weird decor like knights and fairy tale stuff. And his practice ran for a number of years in Delaware, but in 2004, his own sister Linda was forced to alert the State Medical Society because patients had complained to them about her own brother, Earl Bradley, inappropriately touching them during exams. But this was once again somehow brushed under the rug. Then in 2005, just a year later, more disturbing allegations were made against Earl Bradley when a nurse came forward and said she had seen him videotaping patients playing and that he regularly performed unnecessary vaginal exams on his young patients. And once again, this is just a picture of the decor of the building, super creepy. Another complaint was made in 2008 about this doctor, and finally an investigation was undertaken, and wow, did they find some disturbing shit. So when they looked through Dr. Earl Bradley's belongings, they discovered that he had been videotaping his rapes. He had over 13 hours of footage that was recorded on hidden cameras in his office and in his home. Footage of him sexually assaulting young children. After more investigating, they discovered that Earl Bradley had forced children as young as 3 months old to perform intercourse and oral sex on him. And like I said, this sicko videotaped all of it for his personal pleasure. After the arrest and these allegations were featured in the news and made public, lots of families came forward with sordid stories of the crooked doctor and what he did to their kids. Thankfully, this sick pedophile was sentenced to 165 plus years in prison, and this should make you all happy. His office was destroyed. This office had nothing but bad energy inside of it, and I'm glad that all of his company equipment is gone too. And history will only remember Dr. Earl Bradley as what he was, a sick pedophile.